Welcome to Faint Echoes, where quiet hours give voice to loud history, where the weight of time moves gently like drifting dust through forgotten corridors, and where the past does not shout, it hums. If you're settling in for the night, go ahead and dim your lights, adjust your pillow, let the weight of the day slip off your shoulders. Whether you're listening from the warmth of your bedroom in Lagos, or tucked beneath a blanket in Warsaw, or even wandering through midnight thoughts in Tokyo, wherever you are, whatever time it is, feel free to tell us where you're re-listening from in the comments below. We love hearing from the far corners of the world. You're part of something timeless here. A quiet circle of listeners stretching across continents and centuries. Tonight's journey will take us far back, deeper into history than most dare to look. But before we begin, take a moment to think of the Pope. Yes, the one today. You might picture him in a balcony above St. Peter's Square, draped in white, waving peacefully to a sea of people below, surrounded by carefully chosen advisors, protected by bulletproof glass and the Swiss Guard. He speaks often of mercy, of climate change, of interfaith unity. His life is regulated, diplomatic, measured. Now, forget all of that. Imagine instead a man with the same title, Pope, but who lives in a crumbling, rat-filled palace. He doesn't offer blessings. He sends assassins. He doesn't travel in motorcades. He hides from noble families who want him dead. He doesn't shepherd the faithful. He beds their wives. He rises to power not through prayer, but through blackmail. He holds banquets with his mistresses and sells church positions like coins at market. And if someone crosses him, their body is found in the Tiber by morning. This was not fiction. This was the papacy in the 900s, a period so chaotic, historians later named it the Saeculum Obscurum, the Dark Century. Tonight, we're going to peel back that veil. We won't focus on the famous popes, not the reformers or the saints. We'll look instead at those other popes, the ones whose hands were not just raised in prayer, but stained in something darker. This is not a tale of doctrine or dogma. It's a story of survival, of power, and the men who would do anything to keep it, of families who treated the papacy like a throne to be bought, gifted, stolen, and sold again. And through it all, we won't just examine what happened. We'll slow things down and ask, what did it feel like to live in that world? What was it like to serve under such men? What would your life have looked like as a lowly servant in the Vatican during its darkest hour? So now, take another deep breath. Let the hush settle. Let your imagination soften like candle wax under heat. Let the world outside your window fade, just for a while. You are no longer in your bed, you are in Rome. And the year is 904. Let's begin. Imagine, if you will, that you are not in your present-day world of pillows and soft lighting, but in a time when the sacred and the profane lived shoulder to shoulder, when power was not only held in the hands of kings, but in the smoke-filled corridors of the church, a time when the title of Pope, God's vicar on earth, could be seized, traded, stolen, or soaked in scandal. Today, in the 21st century, the Pope is surrounded by a Vatican of pristine marble, global media, protected by guards with earpieces and centuries of law. But in the year 904, the papacy was a brutal affair. It was a title worth killing for, and often one acquired by force or favor rather than divine inspiration. You live in that world now. It is the year 904. You are a servant, a young cleric, or perhaps a lay attendant in the ancient Lateran palace, once the seat of imperial Rome, now the residence of the Pope. But the grandeur of Rome is fading. Columns still stand, yes, but they hold up ceilings stained by candle soot. The marble is cracked in places. The statues of saints wear faces eroded by time. It is cold this morning, the sort of cold that comes not from winter, but from the heavy, silent stone that surrounds you. The air is still, filled with the scent of extinguished candles and damp linen. You awaken on a simple pallet, nothing more than a wooden frame, straw, and a rough wool blanket that does little against the chill that creeps in through the mortar of the walls. The bell rings in the courtyard. It's a low, ancient sound, a toll rather than a chime. It echoes through the arched halls, calling you to rise, to prepare, to work. The clergy must be robed, the altar prepared, the censer lit. You do not speak as you dress. Talking too early in the day is considered rude, and besides, the other servants are equally weary. The halls are dim, lit only by the flickering of torches in iron brackets. You move quietly down the long corridor, past frescoes that have begun to flake, revealing older paintings beneath. Layers of forgotten history hidden under centuries of dust and plaster. You do not pause to admire them. There is work to do. You begin in the sacristy. The vestments for the Pope must be laid out carefully. Gold-threaded chasubles, richly embroidered stoles, and heavy silk robes lined with fur. Each item has to be folded, smoothed, and prepared with reverence, even if you know that the man who wears them, Pope Sergius III, is feared more than loved. Sergius III is no gentle shepherd. He rose to power after two other popes, Leo V and Christopher, were thrown into prison and disappeared. Some say Sergius had them quietly strangled in their cells. Others say they were simply erased from memory. In Rome, both are often the same thing. You clean the altar steps. The marble is cold under your knees. You scrub harder where a faint brown stain lingers. It has been here for weeks now. The others pretend not to notice it. You do too. Later you carry incense into the chapel. The smoke curls upwards, sweet and thick, rising like a whispered prayer. The priests chant softly in Latin. The words are beautiful if you understand them. If you don't, they are simply sound, holy, hypnotic, humming. As the morning stretches on, the palace begins to stir. Diplomats arrive from the north, seeking favors. Bishops gather, hoping for appointments to wealthier dioceses. And always, behind the scenes, the power of the Tusculan family, Theophylact and his formidable wife Theodora, whispers through the corridors. Everyone knows that Sergius did not rise alone. It was Theophylact, the powerful Roman noble, who placed him on the throne, and it is Theodora, more cunning still, who whispers to him in the quiet hours. Some say she rules Rome more than he does. Others whisper that it is their daughter, Marozia, who will one day become the most powerful woman in Christendom. You see them pass through the halls sometimes. Marozia, only a teenager, yet already commanding attention. Draped in silks imported from Byzantium, she speaks with cardinals and foreign envoys, as if she were royalty. And perhaps she is. After all, in this Rome, blood and lineage matter more than scripture. You spend the rest of the day copying letters in the scriptorium. Your Latin is careful, even if your fingers cramp from the cold. One decree nullifies the ordinations of bishops who were once loyal to the disgraced Pope Formosus. Another orders the confiscation of land from a monastery that dared oppose the Tusculans. You do not question the contents. You are merely the hand that writes them. But you hear the rumors, whispers that Pope Sergius ordered the trial of a corpse, that Formosus, dead and buried, was dug up, dressed in papal robes, and placed on a throne to be judged for crimes of heresy and ambition. That his corpse was mutilated, cast into the river. The priests do not deny it. They simply say the Holy See must remain undefiled. As evening falls, you pass through the courtyard. The nobles are gone now. The torches are lit once again. A few drunk clerics laugh near the kitchens, passing around a jug of wine. You do not stop to join them. Instead, you pass a locked door behind the chapel. You once peeked inside. A small chamber, richly carpeted, filled with cushions and perfume. You were told never to return. They said it was the Pope's private room for reflection, but the whispers say otherwise. Finally, the bell tolls again. You walk back through the stone corridors to your chamber. You do not own the key. You do not own the candle. You do not own the blanket. You are owned in many ways by Rome, by the Church, by the history into which you have been born. The night is quiet, save for distant howling from the hills. You lie down once more on your straw bed. The same questions float above your head. How did the Holy Father become a figure of dread? When did robes of white begin to mask such darkness? And will anyone ever know what it is like to be here? Now, in this life that few will ever write about? Your eyes close to the dim flicker of torchlight. Somewhere in the palace, the Pope is still awake. Perhaps he is praying. Perhaps he is planning. Perhaps he too is afraid. But you sleep, because tomorrow the bell will toll again, and you must rise and serve. Now, as your breathing slows and the faint echoes of candlelight cradle your attention, we journey deeper into Rome's turbulent heart. We trace a century where the papacy was no longer just sacred office. It was a prize, a battlefield, and sometimes a farce. A city of ruins and rivalries. Picture Rome at the turn of the 10th century. Grandeur of empire long faded, stone columns broken, walls softened by moss. Aqueducts lay in disrepair. Wolves roamed city outskirts. Pillars once entered triumphal arches, now formed quiet ruins. But in these physical remains, whispers of power echoed. Here, the church had taken root, but not always in light. In this environment, the papacy held sway, but power no longer came divine. It was rooted in clans, the Theophylax of Tusculum, the Crescenzi, the Counts of Tuscia. Their ambition carved the papacy into an arm of political strategy. Theophylact and Theodora, architects of influence. Theophylact entered the papal household as Vestararius, master of rituals and treasury. The position granted proximity to the Pope, access to arms, land deeds, tax routes, yet Theophylact transformed a ceremonial role into a seat of control. Beside him, Theodora, described in later chronicles as both captivating and formidable, became the true power behind the curtain. She was credited with manipulating papal elections, influencing state decisions, and even arranging aristocratic marriages. Together, they solidified their grip on Rome. Their daughter, Marozia, inherited this authority and amplified it. Pope Sergius III. Shadows over the throne. In 904, Pope Sergius III was elevated in a move steeped more in strategic chess than spiritual calling. He had once been deposed and excommunicated, but with Theophylact's backing, came back stronger. His first acts were calculated. His predecessors, Leo IV and anti-Pope Christopher, disappeared. Many historians describe them as strangled or quietly eliminated during imprisonment. Sergius reversed the decrees of Formosus, an earlier revered pope punished under Stephen VI's corpse trial. He restored property to powerful families, nullified former ordinations, and reasserted aristocratic influence in church affairs. Sergius also held private audiences far removed from saintly altars. Homilies arrived framed in political calculus. Letters were stamped with Theophylact's seal before papal signature. But his most enduring legacy was personal, a son with Marozia. That child, later Pope John X, would embody the merging of papal office with hereditary ambition. Marozia, power, poison, and papal pawn. Marozia first appeared as highborn bride, partner to the Count of Spoleto, but she was no passive consort. A few years later, she aligned with Hugh of Arles, King of Italy, thereby broadening her political reach. In 914, Marozia seized papal process. She orchestrated the election of Pope John XI, but soon turned on him, accusing him of disloyalty, imprisoning him, possibly orchestrating his death within the Lateran walls. Chroniclers provide whispers of the event. A respected pope, suffocated under pillows, silenced by his own palace. An image of quiet brutality masked as political allegiance. As senatrix of Rome, Marozia controlled foreign diplomacy, manipulated church councils, and even distributed land in exchange for loyalty. Ambassadors addressed her with deference reserved for crowned emperors. John V, Alberic II, and the fragile inheritance. In 931, John V ascended the papal throne, Marozia's own son. Though he wore the papal mantle, it was heavily shadowed. His reign was quiet, his acts few. Contemporary accounts suggest he was guided or even coerced by his grandmother Theodora. Theodora died shortly thereafter. Marozia, in the flush of her power, seemed untouchable. That is, until Alberic II, Marozia's son from her first marriage, revolted during the wedding celebration between Marozia and Hugh of Arles. Alberic seized the Lateran, imprisoned both his mother and the king, and declared himself princeps of Rome, protector of the church, but not of papal autonomy. He ruled through Rome until his death in 954. Again, religious authority was overshadowed by family rule. John Docene, a papal teen on the gambler's edge. In 955, John Docene, only 18, was enthroned. His reign shows the extremes of power's corruption when wielded by youth. Chroniclers describe episodes of scandal, late-night revelries in the Lateran, dice on altar tables, rumored involvement in pagan rituals and licentious gatherings. Yet, John the Soothe had political insight as well. In 962, he crowned Otto War as Holy Roman Emperor, linking Rome to the rising Germanic crown. But his ambition turned rash. When Otto's influence threatened his own, he conspired, calling for Byzantine contact, even plotting rebellion. Otto responded, convening a synod in Rome that deposed John. He returned, deposed Otto's appointee in turn. John died soon after, some say in a thunderstorm of shame, others suggest assassination in the confessional. Benedict IX, the Pope for sale. In 1032, yet another youth, Benedict IX, raised the Tusculan banner once more. His reputation was scandalous. Violence, simony, midnight auctions of clerical office. He bore the papal tiara 3 times, losing, selling, and reclaiming it in dizzying succession. Contemporary sources claim he sold the papacy to Gregory VI for a chest of gold, only to return and force Gregory's resignation. This tumult aroused support for reform. In 1046, Emperor Henry III intervened, installing Clement II, signaling the end of Tusculan control and the beginning of papal reform movements, including those led by Hilary of Poitiers, and later, Gregory VII. Threads for reflection. Blood and Church. For over 150 years, papal succession acted as a dynastic stronghold, resembling a royal inheritance more than spiritual stewardship. Violence by silence. Cardinals disappeared. Popes were imprisoned or quietly murdered. Rome slept through tragedies masked in incense. Women in power. Figures like Theodora and Marozia shaped papal history in shadow, wielding influence invisible to most male kneelers. Reform, rooted in turmoil. It took scandal and chaos for a wave of reform to globalize the idea that church offices should be merit-based, not familial property. Let the candles glow, glow feeble now, your mind drifting deeper into reflection. We've traced the rise and fall of iron-fisted popes. Soon, we'll descend to uncover the cadaver synod, hidden vaults, lost crypts, and the stories preserved in silence and rubble. The room is candle-lit, the air thick with wax, dust, and the silent prayers of those who dared speak nothing. Now imagine being summoned, not to pray, but to put a corpse on trial. The year is 897. In a hall inside the ancient Lateran Basilica, Rome's most sacred council gathers. But this is no ordinary synod. Seated at the head of the room, swathed in robes and trembling with self-righteous rage, is Pope Stephen VI. Across from him, in the chair reserved for the accused, is a dead man, a corpse, decomposed, clad in ceremonial vestments, fingers curled inward in rigor mortis. Pope Formosus, who had been dead for nearly a year, had been dug up from his tomb, dressed in the papal garb, propped on a throne, and placed on trial. They called it the Synodus Horrenda, the Cadaver Synod. This moment, part absurdity, part horror and part ritual theatre, has haunted ecclesiastical memory for over 1,000 years. But it was not, as many might assume, the result of insanity. No, it was politics, fear, power, and above all, spectacle. Let us walk through this strange, echoing moment in time, gently now, candle by candle, the dead hope and the living fear. Formosus, once Pope himself, had made many enemies. He had supported Arnulf of Carinthia over Emperor Lambert, a slight that enraged powerful factions. When Stephen VI came into power, supported by Lambert's court, he sought vengeance, not just politically, but spiritually. It was not enough to denounce Formosus posthumously. No, his very soul had to be judged. Stephen accused the corpse of perjury, of ascending to the papacy illegally, and of violating canon law. With a deacon nervously standing behind the body, voicing imagined responses on Formosus's behalf, the trial proceeded. The sentence? That Formosus's acts as pope were void, his ordinations invalid, his very memory desecrated. And so they stripped the corpse of its robes, severed the blessing fingers from the dead hand, and cast the body into the Tiber River. But the story doesn't end there. Rome recoiled. The people murmured. Whispers stirred behind heavy stone doors. Within months, Stephen VI himself was arrested, imprisoned, and strangled in his cell. Retribution, they said, divine or otherwise. And yet the chaos would continue. Digging beneath the Vatican, bones, secrets, and sacred ground. Centuries later, beneath the same soil where these events unfolded, archaeologists would begin the long, careful process of peeling back Rome's layers, century by century, seeking the physical traces of these dark decades. The crypts beneath St. Peter's Basilica are among the richest in the world, but they are not organized neatly. Time has jumbled them, like pages torn from a book and scattered in a storm. In the 1940s, during renovations under Pope Pius V, teams began uncovering ancient tombs, sarcophagi, inscriptions, and chambers once used for burial and worship. Marble fragments with names scratched hastily in Latin, skeletons curled in eternal prayer, dust thick enough to choke a whisper. While much of the effort focused on locating St. Peter's remains, scattered discoveries all around the Lateran and Vatican grounds hinted at darker stories. Unmarked burial pits, shattered reliquaries, even chambers once used for confinement, barely wide enough for a man to kneel. And beneath these, deeper still, pagan altars, repurposed in the early days of the Church. A sobering reminder. Christianity in Rome did not emerge in a vacuum. It built itself atop layers of blood, tradition, and stone. Lost apartments, papal rituals, and ghostly tunnels. Winding beneath the Apostolic Palace and Vatican Hill is a little discussed web of passageways, Not the gilded corridors you see in televised masses, but narrow, ancient tunnels, some sealed with bricks, others kept as storage for relics, scrolls, or once taboo books locked away in what some refer to as the secret archives. Some of these tunnels date back to the 9th and 10th centuries, when the papacy was enmeshed with Roman noble families, the Theophylacts, the Crescenti, powerful clans who dictated who would wear the ring of St. Peter. And it is here, in the faint echoes of these stone arteries, that whispers remain of papal apartments used not for prayer, but for pleasure. Chambers once said to be adorned with tapestries gifted by Frankish kings, tables of onyx and bronze, bowls once filled with fruit and gold, and on the floor, mosaics of pagan scenes, barely scratched away by Christian artisans trying to cleanse the space. In this half-lit underground world, rituals took on their own rhythm, papal feasts, political plots, even secret ordinations. Far from the judging eyes of rival bishops, the lines between sacred and profane blurred. The cultural theatre of papal judgment. To modern ears, the Cadaver Synod sounds grotesque, like something out of medieval fantasy. But in its time, it had precedent. Public judgment rituals, where symbols bore more weight than truth, were common. The corpse was not just a dead man, it was the personification of betrayal, of corruption, of the threat to the Church's authority. By trying a corpse, Pope Stephen VI was not simply airing personal grudges, he was performing a liturgy of power, a warning, a myth in the making. The synod was watched by clergy, noblemen, and possibly even common citizens permitted to stand at the back. Smoke from the incense clouded their vision, but they saw the bones. They heard the voice of the deacon echoing for the dead, and perhaps they believed, for a moment, that divine justice walked the earth. Echoes in art and omission. Oddly, the Church would later bury much of this memory. The Cadaver Synod was removed from many official histories. Later popes reversed its decisions. But the cultural trauma lingered. Few paintings exist of the event, but certain illuminated manuscripts hidden in marginalia show skeletal figures in robes, or bishops scowling at blank-eyed skulls. In 19th century France, artists rediscovered the moment, painting grotesque interpretations of the trial, full of Gothic imagination. But those were exaggerations. The truth, as it so often is, was stranger and quieter. In truth, it was a theatre of shadows, a ritual cloaked in silence and smoke, and its ruins still lie beneath your feet if you walk near the Lateran Palace. Closing the chamber, the Cadaver Synod and its symbolic violence marked a crescendo in an era now known as the Saculum Obscurum, the Dark Age of the Papacy. But unlike many Dark Ages, this one was not defined by absence, not a lack of knowledge or art, but by an overwhelming presence of politics, manipulation, and spectacle. And deep below the Vatican, beneath marble floors and candlelit chapels, the silence of bones still murmurs. Some stories were buried, but not forgotten. And in the whisper of death falling through tomb air, in the worn stones polished by centuries of passing sandals, They wait. The shadows of power. Inside the papal palace, circa 1045 AD. Imagine it is still early morning in Rome. The year is 1045, and the city breathes beneath a sun that has risen above a skyline of ruins and holy domes. Somewhere far below the palace balconies, the Tiber flows slowly past crumbling aqueducts and abandoned temples, symbols of a once greater empire, now in decline. But within the Lateran Palace, once the official residence of the popes, you awaken not to simplicity nor to prayerful austerity, but to the velvet quiet of immense power. You are Pope Benedict IX, or rather, for the third time in your life, you wear the mantle of supreme authority over Christendom. You were elected Pope first as a teenager, pushed forward by the Tusculum family, your own bloodline, who control the city of Rome like feudal barons. Your father, Alberic III, arranged your rise. And though the throne of St. Peter is supposed to be earned through holiness, age, and service, you earned it through inheritance. Now, as the city stirs, your papal household moves with silent ritual. Rising in power, the morning of a pontiff. The chamber you sleep in is layered in shadow. Curtains of indigo linen hang from the stone arches overhead. A brazier smolders with perfumed coals, lavender, cedarwood, and something sweeter, burned to mask the rank smells from the city streets below. You rise slowly, no bell calls you. You do not obey the rhythm of monks or masses. Instead, you rise when it suits you. A servant brings warm water. Another brings word of the day's audiences. Envoys from the Lombard duchies. A delegation of German clergy bearing a letter from the Holy Roman Emperor, and a scribe from Benevento requesting confirmation of land. You dress not in papal white, but in a robe of burgundy, lined with gold stitching. A ring is placed on your finger, not the fisherman's ring, but a heavy one set with obsidian. The room is hushed, except for the soft rustle of pages and the click of sandals on tile. Light creeps in through stained glass, flickering across frescoes of saints and martyrs. Their painted eyes seem to follow you. You do not look back. Court intrigue over communion. Before the sun reaches its peak, you have already refused 3 petitions. One from a group of peasants seeking protection from a corrupt bishop. One from a group of monks pleading for permission to reform their monastery, and one from a widow begging for her son to be spared military conscription by a noble aligned with your family. These decisions are not guided by theology. They are guided by politics. You consider the influence of each party. You ask what lands they hold, whose allegiances they command, whether their favor will strengthen the Tusculum grasp on Rome or threaten it. It is said that Benedict IX once offered a bishopric to a nobleman in exchange for a horse, that he dismissed cardinals for mocking his youth, that he filled his court with flatterers, mistresses, and family loyalists, that he performed mass while intoxicated, slurring Latin rites over trembling altar boys. These may be exaggerations, or they may not. But whether you are licentious or merely young and cynical, you wield the keys of heaven and earth. The chalice you raise in ceremony is lined with gold. The bread you bless was baked by nuns sworn to silence. The wine is brought from your family's estate. You drink, you give communion, you laugh. In Rome, holiness has become performance. Afternoon appointments in a rotten Rome. As the sun arcs high over the Tiber, Rome sizzles under its rays. Yet inside the papal palace it remains cool, the walls thick with marble, the windows narrow slits against the heat. Your afternoon is a performance of governance. You enter the Lateran audience hall, a vaulted chamber where once, centuries ago, popes met emperors. Now you receive nobles with forged titles, barons with petty complaints, clerics eager for advancement. Their gifts pile up, bolts of silk, trays of coin, horses and women. One foreign bishop presents you with a jeweled crucifix, said to contain a splinter of the true cross. Another offers news. Rebellion among the Cluniac monks who preach reform and celibacy. You frown. You have no patience for their kind. Their insistence on purity threatens the old Roman ways, the ways of favor, bloodlines, and negotiation. You assure the bishop that Rome will remain firm, that the Cluniacs have no authority here, that only you speak for God. And in that moment, you believe it. Between God and gold, the business of the church. Behind your throne lies the treasury. It is not simply a room full of coins. It is a map of power. Scrolls stored in niches describe the taxes owed by churches in Spain. Ledgers track bribes paid by French archbishops to avoid papal scrutiny. Locked boxes contain fragments of bones claimed to be from saints, some real, others forged. There are enough relics to fill 3 chapels. You have relics of St. Peter, of St. Paul, of St. Sebastian. You have holy oils, swaddling cloths and thorns said to be from Christ's crown. Pilgrims flock to Rome to see them, and they pay. Each relic is a revenue stream. Each indulgence granted is a favor owed. The very idea of sin and its forgiveness is, under your rule, transformed into a marketplace. Grace has a price. Salvation comes with a seal and a signature. You ponder which relics will be displayed at the next feast, which will be hidden, which can be sold. The evening court, feasts, flesh and fear. As dusk falls, torches are lit in the great halls of the Lateran palace. Musicians tune their instruments. Pages light beeswax candles in chandeliers above the feast tables. Roasted boar is carried in. Eels cooked in honey sauce. Almond cakes dusted with cinnamon. You eat surrounded by men who wear rings of power and speak in half-truths. The guests laugh. The walls echo. Wine flows. And the gossip flows faster. Some nights women join, some nights boys. These affairs are whispered about, not shouted, but they are not secret. Everyone in Rome knows the reputation of this papal court. Chroniclers will later call it a brothel, though the language may be dramatic. Still, even amid this decadence, danger waits. Allies become enemies overnight. The Crescenti family, your rivals, plot your removal. German bishops complain to Emperor Henry III, who sees your papacy as an embarrassment. The reformers grow bolder. Even within your own palace, a few cardinals whisper prayers not for your soul, but for your replacement. Midnight. Reflections in Gilded Guilt. When the palace quiets, long after the laughter has faded and the torches have guttered, you walk alone through the halls. Your footsteps echo on stone. You pass chapels where saints stare down in mosaic and fresco. You pass relics in locked rooms. You pass a cross taller than a man. And you wonder, is this power eternal? Do you truly speak for God? Or are you merely a young man in stolen robes, presiding over a dying empire? The papacy has made you rich. It has made you feared, but it has not made you beloved. In the end, the pressure will be too great. You will be forced to resign. You will sell the papacy for a fee to your godfather. You will try to reclaim it. You will fail, and you will disappear into obscurity. But for now, in this moment, you are Pope. The shadows dance along the walls, the gold glints in the firelight, and the silence of power, corrupt, unquestioned and absolute, wraps around you like a velvet robe. The candles burn low now. The dust of centuries begins to settle, and the echo of iron footsteps, the hushed confessions in cold stone corridors, the uneasy laughter of papal banquets, all these begin to fade. We've walked together through the winding corridors of the Lateran Palace, brushed shoulders with the ghosts of the Saeculum Obscurum, and observed the contradictions of faith and power under the dark velvet canopy of the early medieval papacy. You may be surprised or perhaps simply solemn at what we've uncovered. Not every pope wore a halo. Not every servant knelt out of reverence. And not every prayer in the Vatican was whispered for salvation. There was a time, not so long after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, when the Bishop of Rome was not just the shepherd of souls, but a political animal wrapped in silk and suspicion. A time when the papacy could be bought, sold, stolen, or passed between cousins. A time when reformers dared not speak too loudly, and the stench of corruption wafted even into the incense-laden chambers of churches. Perhaps you're still awake, or perhaps your eyes have grown heavy, your thoughts softer. If you are still with me, let us reflect a little more, not on the popes themselves, but on the silence they left behind. Because beneath all the gilded crosses and carved thrones, beyond the chaos of palace plots and political marriages, behind the smell of burnt wax and wilted lilies, lies the most human question of all: how power changes people. We've seen popes, like Sergius III, who came to power through bloodshed and bent the church to the will of a noble family. We've met John the Bruton, who turned Rome into his personal stage, declaring war and holding orgies in the same halls where Mass was once whispered. And of course, Benedict IX, boy pope, party pope, pawn and player, whose papacy passed hands like coin in a marketplace. We cannot know what they felt in their final hours, whether they trembled before death, whether they found peace, whether they believed their names would be remembered or feared being forgotten. But we do know this: the church survived them. Reforms came. Light filtered slowly back in through the cracks of decay. New voices rose, humble monks, devoted scholars, and future saints who sought to restore the dignity that power had nearly erased. It is easy to look back with judgment, to cast these figures as villains in a morality play, but history is rarely so clean. They were, after all, men, born into brutal times, shaped by survival, raised in the shadow of collapsing empires and clawing ambition. Their sins were real, their influence vast, their humanity complicated. So tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, remember the layers that history hides. That behind every title, pope, emperor, king, bishop, is simply a person caught in the tides of their age, struggling with the same questions that echo in quieter moments. Am I loved? Am I safe? Will I be remembered? The stars that once hung above 10th century Rome still glow above us now, though the city has changed, though the throne has changed, though the world has turned 1,000 times since. And you, wherever you are listening from, are far removed from those shadowed halls. You're in a quieter, kinder world, where the cross on your wall is no longer guarded by mercenaries, and no servant must mop blood from a chapel stair. Take comfort in that. Breathe deeply, and allow the stillness of the present to settle gently around you. You are no longer walking the corridors of the ancient Vatican. You are no longer bound by candlelight or cloaked commands. You are here, safe, calm, and far from the iron grip of history. Thank you for sharing this time with me in the quiet hours when the world softens and the echoes of the past speak low and long. If you are still listening, let us know where in the world you are drifting off from tonight. A candlelit room in England, a quiet flat in Lagos, a warm bed in Boston. Wherever it may be, know that you're part of a shared stillness. And if you've already fallen asleep, may your dreams be deep, and history stay gently distant until the morning. Good night. This has been Faint Echoes, where history whispers you to sleep.